After placing the power supply on the first slot, it's now time to place the CPU on the second slot. Different models of 300 CPUs are categorized here in the subgroup of the CPU 300 folder. As you can see, the different models can be seen here. These CPUs, as you may see, have a specific format for their codes. For example, something like CPU 314C-2DP. As you can see, this code starts with the word CPU. After the CPU usually comes a number between 312 and 319. The greater the number, the more capabilities the CPU has. For instance, CPU 317 has more capabilities compared to CPU 314. After this CPU and the numbers following it in some models, as you can see, there will be either the letters C, IFM, or F. Letters C or IFM in the CPU code show that the CPU has a series of limited input and output modules on top of the CPU module, meaning that when we buy these CPUs, in addition to the CPU module, there are a few input and output modules along with the CPU, and we can connect a limited number of input and output signals to the PLC by means of those modules. In here, C stands for compact, and IFM stands for integrated function module. Another advantage that these kinds of CPUs have is that they usually have an internal function module that gives the CPU the ability to receive high-speed signals. This means that these CPUs can do the same thing that a function module can do for us. Therefore, in some applications, if we need a function module, we can use a compact CPU with an internal function module, which is more economical than using a modular CPU with a separate function module. Another point to consider about compact CPUs and IFMs is that although these CPUs are compact and have built-in input-output modules on them, we can add other additional input-output modules to them if we need to. This means that the compact CPUs have the ability to connect to a few more input and output modules in addition to the input and output modules they have themselves. Okay, in here we have a bunch of other CPUs that have the letter F in their codes, such as CPU 317F-2. This letter F stands for failsafe, and it tells us that this specific CPU model is used in cases where we need the maximum security for the process we are controlling. So the letter F represents that the PLC is, so to speak, failsafe. Okay, after these letters C, IFM, and F, there are usually a bunch of other numbers and letters that are related to the ports that are on the CPU. The CPUs that have a suffix 2DP, such as CPU 315-2DP, have a DP port on them in addition to the MPI ports that we already said are on all CPUs. Hence, 2DP means that our CPU has two ports, an MPI port and a DP port. Some newbies mistakenly think that 2DP means that the CPU has two DP ports. However, this is completely wrong, and as we said, 2DP means that the CPU has an MPI port and a DP port. In the CPUs like 313C-2 PTP, 2PTP also tells us that this CPU has a PTP port in addition to an MPI port. A PTP port, as we discussed before, gives us an opportunity to connect the CPU to devices such as printers or barcode readers directly. CPUs like CPU 315-2 PNDP also have two ports. However, they are slightly different compared to the other CPUs because with these, the first port can also be used as an MPI port and a DP port, and the second port is the Profinet port, which we can use in an industrial Ethernet, also known as the Profinet network. Therefore, 2PNDP tells us that our CPU has two ports. The first port could be used as an MPI port and a DP port, and the second port could be used as a Profinet port. Another type of CPU we have here is the CPU 319-3 PNDP. The 3PNDP in the CPU code tells us that the CPU has three ports on it. The first port could be used as either an MPI port or a DP port. The second port could only be used as a DP port, and the third port could be used as a Profinet port in an industrial Ethernet network. Okay, if we open a subgroup of one of these CPUs, we can see that each of them has different models categorized based on their order number. What we want is a CPU 315 2DP with order number 6ES7 315-2AH14-0AB0. Therefore, in order to choose the desired CPU, we open up the subgroup of CPU 315-2DP, and as you can see, the order number we are looking for is here. If we open its subgroup, we can see there are two different versions of this CPU. Now, which one should we choose? The CPU version chosen here should correspond to the version installed in the enclosure. So now, how can we figure out the CPU version inside the enclosure? In order to find the CPU version, we need to open the CPU's front door so we can read its version that's written in this section. The CPU version that we have here is 3.3.8. Therefore, we need to select version 3.3 between the two versions we have in the hardware configuration. After we find out our desired CPU, we need to place it on the rack. To do so, just like before, we select our slot, which in here is the second slot, and then we double-click on the CPU. As soon as we double-click on the CPU, since it also has a DP port, this window opens for us and it tells us that we can create a Profibus network for the DP port on our CPU. In here, we click on Cancel to close the window, since we don't intend to create a Profibus network. With closing this window, as you can see, our CPU gets on the second slot of the rack. In here, since our CPU has a DP port, another row called X2 is added to the second slot to show us that this CPU is capable of being used in a Profibus network. In the window below, we can see other complementary information about this CPU, such as the order number and its version. Okay, in this lesson, we learned how to select our CPU and hardware configuration and add it to the rack. In the future lessons, we go about adding input and output modules.